For more than 2,000 years, one city shaped the history of the Western world. Its laws, its power, and its ideas still exist around us today. Because of this, it is easy to believe that Rome was always meant to rule, that its rise was natural, that its survival was certain. But it wasn't. In the beginning, Rome was small, weak, and easy to destroy. It was nothing more than a few simple huts built on a wet riverbank. Around it were older kingdoms, richer cities, and stronger armies. By every measure, Rome should have disappeared before history ever noticed it. This story is not about an empire that was destined to win. It is about a city that survived when it should not have. A place that endured disaster, defeat, and collapse, again and again, and still continued forward. You don't need to watch closely. You can simply listen. Let the story move at its own pace. Here on Sleeping Historian, this is a journey you don't have to rush. Settle in, get comfortable, and take a slow breath. This is not a story of conquest. It is a story of survival. This video tells the complete story of Rome, from its earliest beginnings in prehistory, through its founding myths, the Age of Kings, the rise of the Republic, and the growth of the empire. The journey continues all the way to the fall of Constantinople in 1453. This is not a list of moments or highlights. It is one long, continuous story. Each chapter flows into the next, showing how Rome adapted, changed, and endured across centuries. This is a journey through time, power, and legacy. The full story of how Rome survived. Long before Rome existed, the world around the Mediterranean was already changing in quiet but powerful ways. This period, known as the Bronze Age collapse, reshaped the ancient world and created the conditions that would later allow Rome to emerge. It was not a single event, but a slow breakdown of systems that had once kept powerful civilizations connected and stable. During the late Bronze Age, the Mediterranean world was held together by networks of trade, diplomacy, and shared technology. Large kingdoms depended on one another. Metals, grain, timber, and luxury goods moved across long distances by land and sea. No major power existed in isolation. Each relied on the strength and stability of the others to survive. When these connections weakened, the entire system began to fail. One by one, the great powers that had dominated the region lost their ability to control territory and maintain order. Trade routes became unsafe or unusable. Ships stopped arriving at ports. Goods that once flowed freely became scarce. Without steady supplies, cities struggled to feed their populations and support their armies. As trade collapsed, political authority weakened. Kings could no longer reward loyalty or defend borders. Local leaders lost control, and populations began to scatter. Large cities shrank or were abandoned entirely. Some were destroyed by violence. Others simply faded as people moved away in search of safety and food. This collapse created a massive power vacuum across the Mediterranean. Empires that had once ruled wide regions were gone or greatly reduced. No single force was strong enough to replace them. Instead of large, centralized states, the region became fragmented into smaller communities and rival groups. Without dominant powers enforcing order, the balance that had kept the Bronze Age world stable disappeared. The breakdown of trade networks was especially important. Bronze itself required materials from different regions. Tin and copper rarely came from the same place. When long-distance exchange failed, bronze production declined. Tools and weapons became harder to replace. Military strength weakened, and societies lost the technological advantage that had once supported their power. This loss pushed communities toward simpler ways of life. People relied more on local resources. Farming and herding replaced long-distance trade as the foundation of survival. Instead of large palaces and complex administrations, smaller settlements became the norm. The Mediterranean world entered a long period of uncertainty. In this environment, no civilization could easily dominate. But this instability also created opportunity. Without powerful empires controlling every region, new societies had room to grow. Small communities could develop without being immediately absorbed or destroyed by larger neighbors. Italy existed on the edge of this changing world. It was not the center of Bronze Age power, and that distance protected it. While older kingdoms collapsed, Italy avoided total destruction. Its communities were small, scattered, and flexible. They did not depend heavily on long trade networks, which made them more resilient when those networks failed. The collapse reshaped how people lived. Instead of relying on distant rulers or foreign goods, communities became more self-sufficient. Local leadership mattered more than imperial authority. Defense, cooperation, and adaptability became essential skills. This shift was critical. The power vacuum left by the Bronze Age collapse did not immediately create new empires. Instead, it produced a long pause in history, a time when societies slowly rebuilt in new ways. Political systems became simpler, social structures changed, cultural traditions evolved independently rather than being dictated by large empires. This quiet rebuilding laid the groundwork for future civilizations. Rome would eventually rise within this altered world. Its early development was shaped by the absence of dominant powers. Without an empire controlling Italy, Rome could grow gradually. It faced rivals, but none strong enough to eliminate it in its earliest stages. The collapse of trade also encouraged innovation. Communities learned to adapt with what they had. They developed new forms of organization and cooperation. Over time, these skills would become strengths rather than weaknesses. The Bronze Age collapse did not create Rome directly. Instead, it cleared the space Rome needed to exist. It removed the old structures that would have crushed a small settlement before it could mature. It replaced a world of rigid hierarchies with one of competition, survival, and slow growth. In the silence left behind by fallen empires, new stories began. Rome's future depended on this moment of absence. The lack of overwhelming power allowed small settlements to experiment, fail, recover, and try again. The collapse turned the Mediterranean from a tightly controlled system into an open field where endurance mattered more than size. This was the world Rome was born into, not a world of stability and order, but one shaped by loss, fragmentation, and uncertainty. The ruins of the Bronze Age became the foundation stones of a new era. From broken trade routes and vanished kingdoms came a different kind of strength. A strength built on patience, a strength built on survival. And it was in this quiet aftermath, long before Rome had walls or armies, that the conditions for its rise were finally set. Long before Rome became powerful, before armies, laws, or empires, the land itself was already shaping its future. Italy's geography did not promise greatness at first glance. It did not appear rich, unstoppable, or dominant. Yet quietly, without force or intention, the land prepared the path that Rome would one day follow. Italy stretches into the Mediterranean like a long arm reaching south. It sits between Europe and Africa, close to the eastern and western halves of the ancient world. This position would later become important, but in the beginning, it offered something more valuable than power. It offered balance. To the north, the Alps formed a vast natural wall. These mountains were steep, cold, and difficult to cross. For early communities, they acted as protection rather than a prison. Large invading armies struggled to move through them. Entire populations could be slowed, weakened, or stopped before reaching the lands beyond. The Alps did not make Italy unreachable, but they made invasion costly and dangerous. This mattered more than strength. Italy did not need massive armies to defend itself in the earliest centuries. Geography did much of the work. While other regions faced constant pressure from large empires, Italy remained partly sheltered. This allowed small communities to survive long enough to grow. But the Alps were only the first layer. Running down the length of the peninsula were the Apennine Mountains. Unlike the Alps, these mountains did not completely divide the land. Instead, they created separation without isolation. Valleys and plains existed between ridges, allowing movement, trade, and communication. Communities could remain distinct while still connected. This balance shaped how people lived. The Apennines prevented any single group from easily controlling all of Italy. At the same time, they did not cut the land into unreachable pieces. Travel was possible, but never simple. This encouraged competition without annihilation. Rival groups clashed, retreated, adapted, and survived. Rome would later benefit from this environment, but it did not yet know it. The mountains also influenced warfare. Large, rigid armies struggled in broken terrain. Smaller, flexible forces learned to adapt. Over time, this would shape how Roman soldiers fought, moved, and organized. The land itself trained them long before formal armies existed. But mountains alone do not create cities. At the heart of Italy flowed the Tiber River. Calm, steady, and reliable, it became one of the most important features in Roman history. The Tiber was not the largest river, nor the fastest. That was its strength. It could be crossed, traveled, and used without constant danger. The river connected inland communities to the sea while keeping them safely away from coastal raids. Settlements near the Tiber could trade without being exposed. Ships could move goods upriver. Farmers could rely on fertile land along its banks. This was not accidental. The Tiber created a meeting point between worlds. It linked the interior of Italy to the wider Mediterranean without forcing exposure to it. For a future city, this meant access without vulnerability. Rome would rise near this river, but at this stage, it was only one of many small settlements benefiting from its presence. Italy's coasts also played a role. They were long and fertile, offering access to fishing and trade. Yet they lacked the deep protected harbors that encouraged early naval empires. Italy was open to contact but not dominated by it. Foreign traders could arrive, but they could not easily take control. Again, balance mattered more than force. Italy was never the richest land. It did not have endless gold or vast resources. What it had was position. From Italy, one could reach east or west, north or south. Whoever controlled central Italy could move across the Mediterranean without being trapped by it. This would matter later. For now, it meant that Italy was never isolated. Ideas, people, and goods passed through slowly. Influence arrived without overwhelming conquest. Cultures mixed over time, rather than being erased overnight. This mixing shaped resilience. Small communities learned from many sources. They borrowed techniques, beliefs, and tools without losing their identity. No single empire dictated how Italy must function. The land itself resisted domination. Rome would inherit this advantage. When Rome finally began to grow, it did not need to overpower the world immediately. It could expand step by step, using roads, rivers, and valleys that already existed. The geography supported gradual growth rather than sudden explosion. Power built slowly lasts longer. This is the quiet truth of Italy's landscape. It rewarded patience. It punished recklessness. It favored endurance over brilliance. Rome did not rise because it was stronger than everyone else. It rose because the land allowed it time to learn, fail, and adapt. But geography does not choose sides forever. The same mountains that protected Italy could also trap it. The same river that fed Rome could flood and destroy. The same central position that offered opportunity would one day bring enemies from every direction. Italy gave Rome its chance. What Rome did with that chance is another story. Because soon, on one stretch of land near the Tiber, a small settlement would appear. It would seem insignificant, easy to ignore, easy to destroy, and yet, the land beneath it was already whispering a warning. This place will last longer than expected. But survival would not come easily. That comes next. Long before Rome became a city, long before its name carried weight, the land of Italy was already shaped by people whose lives quietly prepared the ground for what was to come. These early Italian peoples did not know they were building the foundation of Rome. They were simply surviving, adapting, and living side by side in a world without empires. Among them were three groups whose paths would eventually cross in ways that changed history: the Latins, the Sabines, and the Etruscans. Each was different. Each carried its own customs, beliefs, and way of life. And yet, over time, their worlds would overlap, blend, and leave lasting marks on a city that did not yet exist. The Latins lived in the central plains of Italy, in a region that would later be called Latium. Their settlements were small and practical. They were farmers and herders, tied closely to the land and the seasons. Life followed a simple rhythm. Fields were worked, animals were tended, and families lived together in close-knit groups. The Latins were not united under one ruler. Instead, they were organized into tribes and clans. Authority came from elders and family leaders rather than kings. This created a culture that valued cooperation, shared responsibility, and loyalty to the group. These values would not disappear. To the east, in the rugged hills of the Apennines, lived the Sabines. Their environment was harsher, and their lives reflected it. They were strong, disciplined, and deeply traditional. Survival in the mountains required resilience and unity. The Sabines were known for their strict customs and strong sense of honor. They moved with their flocks, followed ancient rituals, and guarded their independence fiercely. Their society was less open, more inward-looking, shaped by isolation and endurance. And then there were the Etruscans. To the north, the Etruscans stood apart from everyone else. Their cities were larger, richer, and more advanced. They built in stone, planned their settlements carefully, and created art that showed confidence and skill. Their language was different, their customs unfamiliar, and their influence impossible to ignore. Where the Latins and Sabines lived simply, the Etruscans lived with complexity. They built roads, drained marshes, and raised temples. Their cities were centers of trade and craftsmanship. Metalwork, pottery, and architecture flourished under their hands. They traded widely across the Mediterranean and grew wealthy from it. Most importantly, they governed themselves in organized ways. Kings ruled alongside councils of nobles. Law, ritual, and power were carefully balanced. This structure impressed and influenced their neighbors. The world of early Italy was not divided by hard borders. These peoples lived close enough to interact, trade, and sometimes fight. Over time, they began to influence one another. This cultural blending happened slowly, quietly, and without grand design. Ideas traveled more easily than armies. The Latins adopted practices they found useful. The Sabines shared traditions of discipline and social order. The Etruscans passed down knowledge of engineering, ritual, and governance. None of these cultures replaced the others. Instead, they layered on top of one another. This blending would become one of Rome's greatest strengths. Etruscan influence, in particular, would leave deep marks on Rome's future. Many early Roman customs came directly from Etruscan tradition. Religious rituals, the reading of signs and omens, and the belief that the gods actively guided public life all reflected Etruscan practice. Religion was not private, it was political. Etruscan priests believed the gods spoke through nature. Lightning, birds, and strange events were messages to be interpreted. These ideas would later become central to Roman religion, shaping how decisions were made and wars were declared. Political inheritance mattered just as much. The idea of kingship, public ceremony, and symbolic power came from Etruscan models. Even the visible signs of authority, clothing, emblems, and public rituals were borrowed and adapted. Rome did not invent these systems, it absorbed them. But Rome would never become Etruscan. The Latins' simpler values remained. Practical thinking, discipline, and a focus on duty stayed at the core. From the Sabines came ideas of social order, family loyalty, and endurance. From the Etruscans came structure, religion, and political form. Rome would be a mixture. This blending did not happen peacefully all the time. There were conflicts, rivalries, and tension. But Rome's early strength came from its ability to take what worked and leave the rest behind. No single culture dominated completely. Instead of copying one model, Rome became flexible. It learned how to combine traditions without losing identity. This ability to absorb, adapt, and continue would define its future. Yet at this stage, Rome was still only an idea waiting to form. The Latins had not yet united. The Sabines remained cautious. The Etruscans still held power in the north. Nothing suggested that one small settlement near a river would eventually rise above them all. And that is the quiet mystery. Rome did not begin as the strongest, richest, or most advanced. It began surrounded by people who were older, wiser, and better organized. Its survival depended not on dominance, but on learning. The inheritance was already there. Religion taught Rome how to respect the unseen. Politics taught it how to rule. Culture taught it how to blend rather than break. All that remained was a place where these influences could come together. That place was near the Tiber, and the story of how these peoples finally collided, united, and gave birth to a city is about to begin. While the peoples of Italy were shaping their own ways of life, another influence was quietly arriving from across the sea. Greek settlers began to appear along the southern coasts of Italy and on nearby islands. They did not come as conquerors. They came looking for land, trade, and opportunity. Over time, their settlements became known as Magna Graecia, or Greater Greece. These Greek colonies were not small outposts. They were active cities connected to the wider Greek world. From the coast, they traded goods, shared ideas, and introduced new ways of thinking. Their presence did not erase local cultures. Instead, it added another layer to an already complex land. Trade was the first bridge. Greek merchants exchanged pottery, metal goods, and luxury items with the peoples of Italy. In return, they gained access to grain, livestock, and raw materials. Ports became meeting places where languages mixed and customs were observed. These exchanges were steady and practical, not dramatic, but they carried long-lasting effects. Along with trade came ideas. The Greeks brought new methods of farming, new styles of art, and new ways of organizing city life. Buildings were planned with public spaces. Markets became central gathering points. The idea of the city as a shared civic space slowly spread beyond the Greek settlements. One of the most important gifts was the alphabet. Through contact with Greek traders and settlers, the peoples of Italy encountered written language in a new form. This alphabet would later evolve into Latin script. At first, writing was used for trade, records, and simple communication. Over time, it became a tool for law, religion, and memory. Ideas moved more easily than armies. Greek myths, stories of gods and heroes, traveled inland. Philosophy and debate followed later, but even early on, the presence of Greek culture expanded how people thought about the world. Knowledge no longer belonged only to tradition. It could be written, shared, and passed on. Yet the Greeks did not control Italy. Their colonies remained mostly in the south. Inland regions, including the lands near the Tiber, absorbed Greek influence without becoming Greek themselves. Rome would later take what it needed and ignore the rest. This selective learning mattered. Rome did not copy Greek civilization fully. It adapted it. Trade, writing, and ideas were absorbed slowly, reshaped to fit local values. Greek influence became part of Rome's foundation, but never its identity. While this quiet exchange continued, another story began to form closer to the heart of Italy. This story was not written in trade records or alphabets. It was carried through legend. The story of Romulus and Remus. According to tradition, Rome was born from conflict and abandonment. Twin brothers were cast away as infants and left to die. Saved by chance and raised outside society, they grew strong in a harsh world. Their survival itself became symbolic. This was not a gentle beginning. The myth tells of rivalry between brothers, disagreement over leadership, and a violent ending. One brother kills the other. A city is founded through bloodshed. From its first moment, Rome is linked to violence, boundaries, and power. This is not hidden. The story does not soften its message. Rome's origin is not peaceful cooperation. It is struggle. The myth teaches that order comes through conflict and that survival demands strength. But there is another layer. Archaeology tells a quieter story. Excavations on the hills near the Tiber show evidence of early settlements, simple huts, shared spaces, and gradual growth. There is no proof of twin founders or a single dramatic moment of creation. Instead, Rome appears to have formed slowly as villages merged over time. Legend and archaeology do not agree, and that tension matters. Romans themselves lived with both versions. They accepted the myth as truth, not because it was factual, but because it explained who they believed they were. The story of Romulus and Remus gave Rome an identity rooted in resilience, sacrifice, and authority. The wolf that nurtured the twins became a symbol of the city. It represented both danger and protection. Rome would see itself the same way. Fierce when threatened, nurturing to those who belonged. Violence at the origin was not something to forget. It was something to remember. The myth taught that boundaries must be defended, that betrayal has consequences, that unity is fragile and must be enforced. These ideas shaped Roman law, politics, and military thinking for centuries. At the same time, archaeology reminds us that Rome was also practical. It grew because people worked together, shared land, and adapted to their environment. The myth gave meaning. The evidence showed process. Both were true in different ways. Rome needed the legend to explain its spirit. It needed the reality to survive. Greek influence provided tools, writing, and ideas. The founding myth provided purpose and identity. Together, they formed something new. A city that learned from others but told its own story. A society that accepted complexity without needing certainty. Yet none of this guaranteed success. Greek cities were older. Etruscan cities were richer. Other peoples were stronger. Rome still stood among rivals who could destroy it. The alphabet was learned. Trade was active. Myths were spoken. But the city itself was still small. And the real test was still coming. Because the moment Rome stepped beyond legend and became a political force, it would face choices that no myth could answer. That story begins next. Long before Rome became a city of stone, law, and empire, its story began as a legend. This legend was not gentle or comforting. It was filled with danger, loss, and violence. And yet, it was this story that Romans would return to again and again to explain who they were. The founding myth of Rome is the story of Romulus and Remus. According to tradition, the city was born not from planning or peace, but from abandonment. Two infant brothers were cast away and left to die. They had no protection, no family, and no place in the world. Their survival was uncertain from the very beginning. This uncertainty is important. The legend does not describe Rome as protected or favored from the start. It presents survival as fragile, something earned rather than granted. The twins live only because chance, nature, and endurance allow it. From its first moment, Rome is shown as a place that exists against the odds. As the story continues, the twins grow strong outside the rules of society. They are raised away from cities and kings, shaped by hardship rather than comfort. This distance from order gives them strength. But it also creates conflict. When the time comes to build a city, unity does not last. Romulus and Remus disagree. They argue over leadership and boundaries. The disagreement does not end in compromise. It ends in violence. One brother kills the other, and the city is founded through bloodshed. The myth does not hide this moment. Rome's origin is tied directly to violence. The act that creates the city is also the act that destroys family. This teaches a harsh lesson. Order, according to the myth, requires force. Boundaries must be defended. Authority must be absolute. This is not a peaceful beginning. The killing of Remus becomes a warning embedded in Rome's identity. Anyone who challenges the city's limits will face the same fate. The city is sacred. Its borders matter more than blood. This idea would echo through Roman history. Yet while the legend tells one story, the earth tells another. Archaeology offers a quieter picture of Rome's beginnings. Excavations near the river and on nearby hills reveal small settlements, simple homes, and shared spaces. There is no evidence of a single dramatic founding moment. Instead, the land shows gradual growth. Villages appear to have formed independently and then slowly merged. Families lived close to one another. Trade and cooperation developed over time. The city emerged not from one decision, but from many small steps. Legend and archaeology do not match, and Rome never tried to resolve this contradiction. Romans accepted both versions at the same time. The myth explained meaning. The physical remains explained reality. Together, they created a complete identity. The story of Romulus and Remus was never meant to be a historical record. It was meant to explain character. It told Romans that they were born from struggle, shaped by conflict, and strengthened through loss. Even the symbols matter. The wolf that protects the twins represents danger and care at once. It is wild, powerful, and untamed, yet it nurtures and protects. Rome saw itself the same way. Fierce to enemies, protective to its own. This symbolism became central. Rome would grow into a city that valued strength but also loyalty, discipline but also belonging. The myth justified harsh laws and strict authority by linking them to survival itself. Violence at the origin was not an embarrassment, but was a lesson. At the same time, archaeology reminds us that Rome was also practical. It grew because people worked together, shared resources, and adapted to the land. The city survived because cooperation mattered as much as dominance. This balance defined Rome. The myth taught Romans how to think about power. The evidence taught them how to live. One gave purpose, the other gave stability. Rome did not choose between them. Instead, it carried both forward. As the city expanded, Romans would look back to the story whenever authority was challenged. Kings, generals, and lawmakers would all claim to act in the spirit of the founder. Violence, when used, was framed as protection rather than cruelty. The myth gave permission, but it also carried a warning. If Rome was born from the death of a brother, then internal conflict was always a threat. Unity could break. Power could turn inward. The same force that created the city could one day destroy it. This tension never disappeared. The story of Romulus and Remus was repeated not because it was comforting, but because it was honest in its own way. It acknowledged that survival comes at a cost, that greatness is not clean, that identity is shaped as much by loss as by success. Rome remembered this, and yet, at the moment of its telling, Rome was still small, vulnerable, surrounded by stronger neighbors. The legend explained who Rome believed it was, but belief alone could not protect it. The real test was still ahead, because a city born in myth must eventually survive in reality, and that is where the next chapter begins. Archaeological Rome. The story of Rome does not live only in legends and old stories. It also exists in the ground itself. Beneath the modern city, under layers of soil and stone, there are quiet signs of how Rome truly began. Archaeology allows us to listen to those signs. It does not speak loudly. It speaks slowly, carefully, and patiently. Instead of heroes and battles, archaeology shows daily life. Instead of grand beginnings, it shows gradual change. And this evidence helps us understand Rome before power, before empire, and before history was written down. We begin with the earliest place where this story can be seen: Palatine huts. Now we turn our attention to the Palatine Hill. On this hill, archaeologists discovered the remains of very early homes. These were small huts, not buildings made for display or strength. They were simple structures built from wood, clay, and thatched roofs. The floors were made of packed earth. The walls were light. Everything about them suggests modest living. These huts were not temporary shelters. Inside them, researchers found hearths where fires once burned. Ash, food remains, and tools show that people cooked, rested, and lived here for long periods of time. Storage pits suggest planning for future seasons. This was not a passing settlement, it was a community. The Palatine Hill offered safety. Its height protected the people from flooding caused by the nearby river. It also allowed them to see approaching danger from a distance. At the same time, the hill was close enough to fertile land and water to support farming and daily needs. This balance mattered. The people who lived here were not powerful. They did not control others, but they had chosen their place carefully. The Palatine huts show that Rome began as a place of survival, not dominance. As time passed, these early homes remained important in memory. Even when Rome grew larger, later generations remembered the Palatine as the heart of the city. The hill became symbolic, not because of wealth, but because it represented beginnings. Now that we have explored the Palatine Hill, we can move outward and look at the land that surrounded it. The 7 hills. Now we are shifting our focus from one hill to many. Rome did not begin as a single, unified city. Around the Palatine stood other hills, each supporting its own small settlement. Together, these became known as the 7 hills. Each hill developed separately at first. People lived on the Aventine, Capitoline, Quirinal, Viminal, Esquiline, Caulian, and Palatine hills. Archaeological evidence shows that these communities had their own spaces, their own habits, and their own daily routines. They were neighbors, but not one people yet. Paths connected the hills. Over time, tracks formed between settlements. Shared burial areas appeared in the low ground between them. These signs show interaction. People traded goods, shared resources, and slowly built relationships. There is no evidence of sudden conquest. The hills were not forced together by violence. Instead, they grew closer through necessity. Living near one another meant sharing water, land, and protection. Cooperation became useful, then essential. Markets formed naturally. Where hills met, people gathered to exchange food, tools, and livestock. These meeting points helped turn separate communities into a connected whole. Over generations, boundaries softened. The 7 hills became one city, slowly. This process shaped Rome's future thinking. Because the city began as many parts, unity was always important. Balance mattered. No single group should control everything at once. This idea would later influence Roman politics. Now that we have seen how the hills came together, we turn to what all of this evidence tells us as a whole. Material evidence. Now we step back and look at the physical remains together. Material evidence includes everything left behind by early Romans. Pottery pieces, tools, building traces, and ritual spaces all tell a consistent story. Life was simple. Resources were limited. People adapted carefully to their environment. There is no sign of early luxury. Archaeology does not show palaces, temples, or grand walls in the earliest period. Instead, it shows effort and patience. Rome did not rise quickly. It grew through repetition and adjustment. Shared religious spaces appear early. Altars and offerings are found near common areas. This suggests that belief helped unite people before formal government existed. Religion came before law. Ritual came before rule. This is important. It shows that Rome's unity was social and cultural before it was political. People learned to gather, to agree, and to belong before they learned to command. Archaeology also shows continuity. There is no single layer in the soil that marks Rome's sudden birth. No clear line divides before Rome and after Rome. Instead, there is steady development. Each generation builds on the last. This contrasts with legend. Myth tells us of one moment, one founder, and one act. Material evidence tells us of many people, many years, and many small decisions. Rome accepted both stories. The ground explains how Rome lived. The legend explains how Rome thought. Together, they formed identity. The Palatine huts, the 7 hills, and the physical remains all point to the same truth. Rome was not born powerful. It learned to survive first. That as these communities joined and life became shared, new challenges appeared. Questions of leadership, order, and control began to matter. And that is what comes next. H7 Kings of Rome. Before Rome became a republic, and long before it ruled an empire, it was governed by kings. These kings did not rule in the same way, and they did not leave the same kind of mark. Each one shaped Rome differently. Together, they formed the foundation of the city's character. Now we begin with the first king, where Rome's story truly starts. Romulus, the 6 Elements and Unity. The story begins with Romulus. Romulus is remembered as a figure of strength and force. His rule represents violence, but also unity. According to tradition, Rome was founded through conflict, and Romulus ruled with absolute authority. He established the first boundaries of the city and made it clear that those boundaries mattered. Under Romulus, Rome became a place where order was enforced through power. He gathered people from different backgrounds and forced them into a single community. This unity did not come from agreement. It came from necessity. Romulus taught Rome its first lesson. Survival requires strength. That strength alone could not sustain a city. When Romulus disappeared, Rome faced a different challenge. And now, the city turned toward peace. Pneuma, religion, and order. Now we move to Pneuma. Pneuma ruled in complete contrast to Romulus. Where Romulus used force, Pneuma used structure. His reign focused on religion and order. He organized rituals, ceremonies, and traditions that brought stability to daily life. Pneuma believed that Rome's survival depended on harmony with the gods. Under his rule, religion became central to public life. Sacred laws were respected. Ritual calendars shaped the year. Peace became possible. Pneuma showed Rome how to live without constant war. But peace did not last forever. As Rome grew, pressure returned. And the next king answered that pressure with conflict. Julius, where now we turn to Tullus. Julius where? His reign was defined by war. He believed that Rome's strength came from expansion and victory. Under Tullus, Rome became more openly militaristic. Conflict was no longer avoided. It was embraced. Through war, Rome absorbed neighboring communities. Through battle, it gained confidence. Tullus expanded Rome's influence, but his focus on warfare weakened balance within the city. Rome grew stronger, but also more restless. After years of conflict, Rome needed stability again. And so the next king sought balance. Ancus. Balance. Now we move to Ancus. Ancus ruled with moderation. His reign combined the peace of Pneuma with the strength of Tullus. He understood that Rome needed both order and defense. Ancus strengthened Rome's position without endless war. He expanded the city carefully and improved its connections to surrounding regions. Under his leadership, Rome became more organized and more secure. Ancus showed that Rome could grow without losing control. But Rome was changing. New influences were arriving, and with them came a king who would transform the city physically. Tarquin. Infrastructure. Now we focus on Tarquin. Tarquin's reign is remembered for construction and development. Under him, Rome began to look like a city rather than a collection of settlements. Roads, drainage systems, and public spaces took shape. Infrastructure changed how Romans lived. Flooded land was reclaimed. Public areas allowed people to gather. The city became more permanent, more structured, and more confident. Tarquin did not just rule Rome. He built it. But as Rome became more complex, new problems emerged. Power needed rules, society needed structure, and the next king addressed this directly. Servius. Servius? Social reform. Now we turn to Servius. Servius focused on social reform. He reorganized Roman society, creating systems that defined citizens by role and responsibility. This made Rome more orderly but also more divided. People now had defined places within the state. Servius strengthened Rome by creating structure, but that structure also revealed inequality. Some gained influence, others felt excluded. Rome became stronger, but tension grew beneath the surface. That tension would soon explode. Tarquin, the Proud, the Margins. Now we come to the final king. Tarquin the Proud. Tarquin the Proud ruled through fear. His reign is remembered as tyranny. He ignored tradition, silenced opposition, and concentrated power in himself alone. Rome suffered under his rule. The balance created by earlier kings collapsed. Trust was broken. Violence returned, not as survival, but as oppression. The people of Rome reached their limit. And when Tarquin was finally removed, Rome made a decision that would define its future forever. They would never allow a king again. What followed was not peace, but transformation. And that is where the next chapter begins. After the fall of the last king, Rome stood at a quiet crossroads. The city was still small, still surrounded by rivals, and still uncertain of its future. But one thing was now clear in the minds of its people. Rome would never again be ruled by a king. This belief shaped everything that followed. The experience of tyranny had left a deep mark on Roman memory. Kingship was no longer seen as protection. It was seen as danger. Power held by one person felt unsafe, unpredictable, and threatening. Even the idea of a king became something to fear. This was the beginning of Rome's anti-kingship psychology. Romans did not simply remove their king. They rejected the entire idea behind kingship. They believed that when power rested in one set of hands, it always led to abuse. No matter how wise a ruler might seem, absolute authority would eventually turn against the people. This fear became a guiding principle. Instead of trusting one ruler, Romans chose to divide power. They believed that ambition could be controlled only by setting power against itself. One authority would limit another. One voice would challenge the next. No single man would stand above the law. From this fear came a new system. The Roman Republic was built on balance. Power was no longer centered. It was spread carefully across different offices and institutions. Each had its role. Each had limits. And each depended on the others to function. At the top of this system were the consuls. Rome chose not one leader, but two. These consuls shared authority equally. Neither could rule alone. Each could block the decisions of the other. This was not meant to create harmony. It was meant to create restraint. The consuls held executive power. They led armies. They enforced laws. They represented the state. But their authority was temporary. They served for a limited time, and when that time ended, they returned to private life. This was intentional. Romans believed that short terms prevented ambition from taking root. No man could turn office into a throne. No one could rule long enough to become dangerous. Yet even the consuls were not supreme. Above daily leadership stood the Senate. The Senate was not new. It had existed under the kings. But now it took on greater importance. Made up of Rome's most experienced and respected men, the Senate served as a source of continuity. While consuls changed, the Senate remained. It advised on laws, guided foreign policy, and controlled finances. It did not rule directly, but its influence was constant. Decisions carried weight because they reflected tradition and collective memory. The Senate became the voice of stability. This balance between consuls and Senate created tension, and that tension was the point. Neither side could dominate fully. Authority moved slowly. Decisions required agreement, patience, and compromise. The system was designed to frustrate ambition. Romans accepted inefficiency as a safeguard. Delay was safer than speed. Debate was safer than command. Conflict within government was better than submission to one ruler. But balance did not mean equality. Power in the early republic rested mainly with elite families. The Senate was dominated by the wealthy and well-connected. Ordinary citizens had limited influence. Still, the system was a step away from absolute rule. It was fragile. The republic depended on shared belief. It worked only if people respected limits. Laws mattered because Romans agreed they mattered. Offices mattered because tradition supported them. There was no army enforcing obedience to the system itself. That made the republic both strong and vulnerable. In moments of crisis, the system could bend. Temporary authority could be granted. Emergency powers could be used. But always with fear, always with caution. Romans remembered the kings. This memory shaped their actions. It made them suspicious of popularity. It made them wary of anyone who gathered too much support. Even successful leaders were watched carefully. No victory erased fear. The republic did not promise peace. It promised control. It did not promise unity. It promised balance. Romans accepted tension as the price of freedom. Yet this balance came with a cost. Decision-making was slow. Rivalries were constant. Personal ambition did not disappear. It simply found new paths. Politics became competitive, sometimes bitter. But Rome preferred this chaos to the certainty of tyranny. The Republic was an experiment. It was not built for comfort. It was built for survival. Every rule existed to prevent the return of kingship. Every office was shaped by fear of the past. This fear kept Rome cautious. It also kept Rome adaptable. The system could change without breaking. New offices could be added. Powers could be adjusted. The Republic could evolve without collapsing into tyranny. This flexibility would become one of Rome's greatest strengths. For now, the city had chosen a new path. Kings were gone. Power was divided. Authority was restrained. But the Republic was still young. Its institutions had not yet been tested by time, expansion, or internal conflict. The balance that seemed so careful could still fail. And as Rome grew, that balance would be challenged again and again, because removing kings was only the first step. Learning how to live without them would be far harder. And that is where the next chapter begins. After the Republic was formed, Rome did not become calm or equal overnight. Removing kings solved one problem, but it revealed another. Power was no longer held by one ruler, but it was still not shared fairly. Beneath the balance of offices and laws, tension slowly grew between different groups of Romans. This tension became known as the struggle of the orders. Roman society was divided into two main groups. The patricians were the old elite families. They held most political offices, controlled land, and dominated the Senate. The plebeians were the majority of the population. They were farmers, craftsmen, laborers, and soldiers. They worked the land, fought in wars, and paid taxes. Yet, they had little political power. At first, this imbalance was accepted. But over time, resentment grew. Plebeians began to question why they were expected to defend a state that did not fully protect them. Debt, unfair judgments, and lack of representation created pressure that could no longer be ignored. The Republic faced a choice. Either it adapted or it fractured. Plebeians discovered that their greatest strength was collective action. When called to fight, they refused. When demanded to obey, they withdrew. Without soldiers and workers, Rome could not survive. This peaceful resistance forced the ruling class to listen. From this conflict came one of the Republic's most important changes, the office of the tribune. Tribunes were officials chosen by the plebeians to protect plebeian interests. Their power was unique. They could block decisions made by magistrates or the Senate if those decisions harmed the common people. This veto power gave the plebeians a voice where none had existed before. Tribunes were considered sacred. Harming one was forbidden. This protection ensured that plebeian representatives could act without fear. For the first time, the lower classes had a formal role in the government. This did not create equality, but it created influence. Plebeian power grew slowly, not through revolution, but through negotiation. Each gain came from pressure, not violence. Each reform was a compromise. Rome did not solve class conflict. It managed it. This became a defining feature of the Republic. Adaptability. Instead of collapsing under internal division, Rome adjusted its system. The struggle of the orders did not weaken Rome, it strengthened it. Conflict became part of governance. Disagreement became normal. The state learned how to survive disagreement without destroying itself. Yet one problem remained: law itself. In early Rome, laws were not written down. They were remembered and interpreted by patrician magistrates. This allowed abuse. Plebeians often did not know the rules that governed them. Justice could change, depending on who held office. This secrecy created mistrust. Plebeians demanded clarity. They wanted laws that were visible, fixed, and applied equally. They wanted rules that could not be changed quietly or manipulated behind closed doors. Rome resisted at first, but pressure continued. Eventually, the Republic agreed to put its laws into writing. What followed became one of the most important developments in Roman history: the 12 Tables. These laws were publicly displayed so that all citizens could see them. They covered everyday matters, property, family relations, debt, and legal procedure. The language was direct and firm. Punishments were strict, but expectations were clear. This was the key change. Transparency. Law was no longer hidden knowledge. It belonged to the community. Citizens could now understand their rights and responsibilities. Judges were bound by written rules rather than personal interpretation. This did not make Rome fair by modern standards, but it made Rome consistent. The 12 Tables became the foundation of Roman legal tradition. Even when laws changed later, this idea remained. Law should be public. Law should be known. Law should apply across society. This principle shaped Rome's future. Legal legacy mattered more than specific rules. The belief that justice required visibility became deeply rooted. Roman law would later influence systems far beyond Italy, but its core idea began here. The struggle of the orders and the creation of written law are closely linked. Both show how Rome responded to pressure. When conflict arose, Rome did not erase it. It shaped it into structure. Tribunes gave voice. Written law gave clarity. Neither ended in equality, but both prevented collapse. This ability to bend without breaking defined the Republic. Rome did not become stable by eliminating tension. It became stable by learning how to live with it. Class conflict did not disappear. It became part of the system, and that system worked for a time. As Rome expanded, new citizens joined. Wealth increased. Power shifted. The same questions returned in new forms. Who controls the state? Who benefits from its success? Who is protected by its laws? The answers would change, but the pattern remained: adaptation over destruction. The Republic survived its internal struggles by adjusting its foundations. Yet each adjustment created new pressures. Each solution carried future consequences. The laws stood. The tribunes spoke. The balance held. For now, but as Rome grew beyond its borders, these internal systems would face challenges they were never designed to handle. And that is where the next chapter begins. As the Roman Republic survived its internal struggles, it began to look outward. The city was no longer fighting only to protect itself. It was learning how to grow. What followed was not sudden conquest, but a long process of endurance, adjustment, and change. Rome's rise across Italy, and then beyond it, would reshape everything it had been. Italian unification. The Samnite Wares Italy was not a single nation. It was a land of many peoples, each guarding its own territory. Among the strongest of Rome's rivals were the Samnites. They lived in the central mountains, hardened by rough terrain and constant conflict. They were skilled fighters and deeply independent. The wars between Rome and the Samnites were long and exhausting. Victory did not come quickly. Rome faced defeat, humiliation, and setbacks. But what defined these wars was persistence. Rome did not give up. Each loss became a lesson. Adaptation became Rome's greatest weapon. The mountainous landscape forced Rome to rethink how it fought. Old methods failed. In response, Rome changed its military structure. Soldiers became more flexible. Units learned to move independently. Discipline and organization improved. This evolution mattered more than any single battle. Over time, Rome learned how to fight in difficult terrain and how to recover from failure. The Samnites were eventually overcome, not by brilliance, but by endurance. Through these wars, Rome unified much of Italy. But unification did not mean destruction. Rome did not erase defeated peoples, it absorbed them. And this choice shaped everything that followed. Expansion beyond. Once Italy was largely under Roman control, Rome faced a new challenge. How could it hold such a large and diverse land without constant rebellion? The answer was strategy. Rome established colonies across key regions. These were not random settlements. They were placed carefully to secure land, control movement, and project Roman presence. Colonies acted as anchors of stability. Roads connected everything. Roman roads were practical, direct, and durable. They allowed armies to move quickly, goods to travel safely, and communication to flow. Roads turned distance into connection. But Rome's most powerful tool was citizenship. Rome did not treat all conquered people the same. Some were granted full citizenship. Others received partial rights. This created loyalty without complete equality. Allies had reasons to support Rome because Rome offered inclusion. This citizenship strategy was gradual. It rewarded cooperation and punished rebellion. Over time, it bound Italy together more tightly than fear alone ever could. Rome was no longer just a city. It was becoming a system, and that system was about to face its greatest test. The Punic Wars. Rome vs Carthage. Across the sea stood Carthage. Wealthy, powerful, and dominant at sea. Carthage controlled trade across the western Mediterranean. Rome and Carthage were very different. One was a land-based republic. The other was a maritime empire. Conflict was inevitable. The Punic Wars transformed Rome completely. These wars were not quick. They were long, brutal, and costly. Rome faced an enemy unlike any it had known, and then came Hannibal. Hannibal brought the war directly to Italy. His campaign shocked Rome. Roman armies were defeated repeatedly. The most devastating blow came at Cannae. At Cannae, Rome suffered catastrophic loss. Its armies were surrounded and destroyed. The defeat shook the Republic to its core. Many believed Rome was finished. But Rome did not surrender. Instead, it adapted again. Rome avoided direct confrontation. It rebuilt patiently. It learned how to counter Hannibal's strengths. The war became one of endurance rather than decisive battles. Years later, the struggle shifted. The war moved to Africa. At Zama, Rome finally defeated Carthage. Hannibal was beaten. The balance of power changed forever. This was total transformation. Rome emerged from the Punic Wars no longer just dominant in Italy, but supreme in the Western Mediterranean. It gained territory, wealth, and confidence. But victory came with consequences. Rome was now an imperial power. And empire brings new challenges. Eastern conquests, with the West secured, Rome turned east. The lands of Greece, Macedonia, and the Seleucid realms were rich in culture and history. These regions had once ruled vast empires of their own. Now they faced Rome. Roman legions confronted Greek armies and defeated them. Macedonia fell. Seleucid power was broken. Greece came under Roman control. But Rome did something unusual. It did not erase Greek culture. Instead, it absorbed it. Greek art, philosophy, education, and ideas flowed into Rome. Roman elites studied Greek thought. Greek language and culture became symbols of learning and status. This was cultural absorption, not replacement. Rome conquered politically, but it was transformed culturally. The conqueror became a student. This blending reshaped Roman identity. Rome gained power, but it also gained complexity. Its world grew larger. Its problems grew deeper. The Republic now ruled lands far beyond what its founders had imagined. Italy, the Western Mediterranean, and the Greek world were all connected under Roman authority. The system was stretched. The old balance of the Republic was under strain. Rome had learned how to conquer. Now it had to learn how to rule. And that challenge would change Rome forever. And that is where the next chapter begins. As Rome grew stronger abroad, something important was quietly weakening at home. The Republic still looked powerful. Its armies victorious and its influence wide. But beneath that strength, deep problems were taking shape. These problems did not come from enemies outside the city. They grew from within Roman society itself. Internal decay of the Republic victory had brought great wealth to Rome, but that wealth did not spread evenly. A small group of families became extremely rich. They owned large estates, controlled politics, and dominated public life. At the same time, many ordinary citizens became poorer. Small farmers suffered the most. Long military service kept them away from their land. When they returned, they often found their farms ruined or sold. Wealthy landowners bought this land and created large estates worked by slaves. Slavery expanded rapidly. Conquests supplied Rome with huge numbers of enslaved people. Slave labor replaced free workers in farms, workshops, and households. This made production cheaper for the rich, but it removed opportunities for ordinary Romans. Free citizens struggled to compete with unpaid labor. As inequality grew, resentment followed. The old values that had once guided the Republic began to fade. Ideas like moderation, duty, and shared responsibility lost importance. Public life became a contest for power and prestige. Political success was no longer about service to the state, but about personal advantage. Moral decline did not mean that Romans became careless or weak. It meant that ambition replaced restraint. Wealth replaced honor. Winning mattered more than stability. The Republic still functioned, but it no longer felt united. And into this growing tension stepped reformers who believed Rome could still be saved. The Gracchi brothers. The Gracchi brothers believed the Republic was in danger, not from enemies, but from imbalance. They saw the growing divide between rich and poor as a threat to Rome's survival. Their goal was reform, not revolution. They wanted to restore opportunity to ordinary citizens. Their proposals focused on land. They believed public land should not be controlled by a few families. Instead, it should support citizens who served the state. By redistributing land, they hoped to rebuild the class of small farmers that had once formed the backbone of Rome. But reform challenged power. The elite resisted fiercely. They saw these changes as attacks on their wealth and influence. Debate turned bitter, trust collapsed. Politics became personal. The Gracchi tried to push their reforms through public support. This alarmed the ruling class. The idea that popular pressure could override tradition frightened the Senate. What followed changed Rome forever. Political violence entered Roman life. The deaths of the Gracchi were not accidents. They were deliberate acts meant to stop reform. For the first time, political disagreement ended not in compromise, but in bloodshed. This moment marked a turning point. Violence became an accepted political tool. Force replaced persuasion. Once this line was crossed, it could not be erased. The Republic continued, but something essential had been lost, and the consequences of that loss were only beginning to unfold. Marius and army Rome. As social tension increased, Rome's military needs changed. Wars grew longer and more distant. The old system, where property-owning citizens served temporarily, was no longer enough. Marius introduced a new approach. He opened military service to landless citizens. The state supplied weapons and armor. Soldiers now depended on the army for income, food, and future security. This created professional soldiers. These men trained longer, fought more often, and became highly effective. Militarily, Rome grew stronger. Its armies became disciplined, experienced, and reliable. But this strength came with a hidden cost. Loyalty shifted. Soldiers no longer fought mainly for the Republic. They fought for their generals. Their future depended on commanders who promised rewards, land, and protection. Personal loyalty replaced civic duty. The army became tied to individuals rather than institutions. This change was subtle but dangerous. Generals now commanded not just armies, but devotion. Political power followed military success. Victories abroad translated into influence at home. The balance of the Republic began to tilt. Rome had created a force it could no longer fully control. Professional soldiers brought security, but they also brought instability. The Republic relied on the army, yet feared it. Leaders needed military support, yet worried about its power. The system was no longer stable. It was waiting for someone willing to use this new loyalty for personal ambition. And that moment was approaching. Because when soldiers follow generals instead of laws, the fate of the Republic is no longer decided in debate halls. It is decided on the march. As the Roman Republic struggled with growing instability, fear slowly replaced trust. The old rules still existed, but belief in them was fading. Power was no longer restrained by tradition alone. It was increasingly shaped by force. This shift became unmistakable during the rise of Sulla, a man whose actions would permanently alter Rome's understanding of law and authority. Sulla and the proscriptions. Sulla had learned a dangerous lesson from earlier conflicts. Armies could decide politics. Loyalty from soldiers mattered more than votes or debate. When Sulla marched on Rome with his legions, he proved that military force could overrule the Republic itself. Once in control, Sulla did not rule quietly. He claimed to be restoring order, but the method he chose was terror made legal. His most infamous action was the use of proscriptions. These were official lists of enemies of the state. Names were posted publicly. Anyone on the list could be killed without trial. Murder became lawful. Property belonging to the condemned was seized. Rewards were offered to those who carried out executions. Even family members were punished, losing status and future opportunity. Fear spread through the city. Silence became a survival skill. The terror was systematic, not chaotic. Sulla did not act in secret. Everything was done openly, under the appearance of legality. This was the most disturbing change. Violence was no longer lawless. It was sanctioned. The precedent was devastating. Sulla eventually stepped down from power, claiming his work was complete. But what he left behind was far more dangerous than any reform. He had shown that force could reshape the state. He had proven that laws could be used to justify terror. Future leaders would remember this. Rome had crossed another line. And once crossed, it could never truly be undone. Yet fear was not limited to politics alone. Beneath the struggles of elites and generals, another crisis was building, one rooted in suffering, exploitation, and desperation. Revolts. Spartacus Rome's success depended heavily on slavery. Conquests supplied vast numbers of enslaved people who worked farms, mines, and households. This system enriched the Republic, but it also created deep instability. Slaves lived without rights, protection, or hope. Among them rose Spartacus, a man whose rebellion exposed the cracks in Roman control. Spartacus was not a politician or a general of the Republic. He was a gladiator, trained to fight and expected to die for entertainment. Instead, he escaped. What began as a small break for freedom quickly grew into a massive uprising. Slaves from across Italy joined him. The revolts expanded rapidly, drawing strength from shared suffering and desperation. Rome was unprepared. Legions sent to crush the rebellion failed again and again. Slave forces defeated trained Roman troops. For years, the Republic struggled to regain control. This terrified the ruling class. The revolt challenged more than military strength. It questioned the moral foundation of Roman society. A system built on forced labor now faced resistance from those it oppressed. Spartacus did not seek to rule Rome. His goal was escape and survival. Yet his success forced Rome to confront its own dependence on slavery. Eventually, overwhelming force ended the rebellion. The punishment was severe. Captured rebels were executed publicly. Their deaths were meant as warning. Rome reasserted control, but at great cost. The revolt was crushed, but its message remained. Rome ruled through domination, not harmony. Together, Sulla's terror and the slave revolt revealed a deeper truth. Rome was no longer governed primarily by consent or tradition. Fear had become a tool of control. Violence was now accepted as necessary. The Republic survived, but it was hollowed. Political opponents could be eliminated legally. Entire populations could be exploited until they rebelled. Stability depended on force rather than unity. These events did not destroy Rome immediately. They changed it. Power now belonged to those willing to use violence openly. Soldiers learned that loyalty could be rewarded. Leaders learned that fear could maintain order. The Republic still stood, but it was no longer the same. It was waiting for the next figure bold enough to claim authority in the name of stability. And that figure was already rising. And that is where the next chapter begins. As the Roman Republic entered its final years, order still existed on the surface. Laws were still spoken. Offices were still filled. Elections were still held. But beneath these familiar forms, the system was breaking down. What remained looked like stability, yet felt increasingly hollow. This period became known for chaos, not sudden chaos, but slow decay. In the late Republic, corruption had become ordinary. It was no longer shocking, it was expected. Public offices were treated as opportunities for personal gain, rather than public service. Governors sent to the provinces returned with fortunes built on exploitation. Justice could be delayed, bent, or bought. Trust in institutions faded. The Senate still met, but many citizens believed it no longer represented the Republic's values. Decisions were influenced by wealth, alliances, and fear. Political competition became ruthless. Rivals did not simply disagree. They sought to destroy one another. Power was unstable. Men climbed quickly, fell violently, and were replaced just as fast. Alliances shifted constantly. Loyalty was temporary. Ambition ruled every level of public life. Yet this corruption did not come only from greed. It came from desperation. Debt trapped many citizens. Veterans returned from wars to find no place in society. Young aristocrats saw no path forward without bending rules. The Republic had created pressure that had nowhere to go. When systems fail to adapt, extremes appear. And in Rome, one extreme took shape in the form of conspiracy. The Catiline conspiracy. Into this environment stepped Catiline. Catiline was not an outsider. He came from a noble background and moved within Rome's political circles. Yet he carried heavy debts and broken ambitions. Repeated failures left him bitter and reckless. He believed the system was rigged. Rather than reform it, he chose to destroy it. The conspiracy that formed around Catiline drew together many different kinds of people. Some were ruined aristocrats. Others were veterans who felt abandoned. Some were simply desperate. What united them was resentment. Their plan was extreme. They sought to overthrow the government, eliminate political enemies, and cancel debts. Fire, murder, and chaos were tools, not consequences. The goal was total collapse followed by renewal on their terms. Rome stood closer to disaster than it realized. But conspiracies are fragile. Secrets spread. Words slip. Ambition attracts attention. The plot was uncovered before it could unfold fully. At the center of the response stood Cicero, a man who believed deeply in the Republic's institutions. He exposed the conspiracy publicly, naming the danger before the Senate and the people. Rome held its breath. Catiline fled the city. His followers were arrested. Decisions were made quickly. Under pressure and fear, the conspirators who remained were executed without trial. The Republic had been saved, but at a cost. After math and consequences, the Catiline conspiracy failed, but it revealed how fragile Rome had become. The fact that such a plot could form at all was alarming. The fact that it attracted support was worse. Rome was no longer united by shared belief. It was held together by fear of collapse. The response to the conspiracy raised troubling questions. Emergency measures had overridden traditional protections. Law had bent again under pressure. Each crisis justified exceptions. Each exception weakened norms. The Republic survived by breaking its own rules. And each time it did so, it made the next break easier. The conspiracy also deepened divisions. Some saw Catiline as a criminal. Others saw him as a symptom. The underlying problems remained unsolved. Debt still crushed citizens. Corruption still dominated politics. Ambitions still drove leaders. The crisis passed, but the instability did not. Rome had avoided destruction, but it had not found balance. After Catiline, the Republic continued. Offices were filled. Laws were spoken. Life moved forward. Yet something had shifted. Fear now lived openly in politics. Emergency powers felt normal. Violence, once shocking, now felt possible at any moment. The Republic had entered a dangerous phase. It was no longer protected by tradition alone. It depended on strong men. And when a system reaches that point, it begins to wait not for peace, but for someone powerful enough to take control. That figure was already moving through Roman life, gaining influence, loyalty, and opportunity. The chaos of the late Republic was not an ending. It was preparation. And that is where the next chapter begins. As the Republic weakened under chaos and ambition, one man rose above all others. His name would become inseparable from Rome itself. His life marked both the final crisis of the Republic and the beginning of something entirely new. Julius Caesar built his power far from Rome. In Gaul, he led long campaigns that brought vast lands under Roman control. These wars made him rich, famous, and loved by his soldiers. They followed him not only out of duty, but out of loyalty. While Caesar conquered abroad, fear grew at home. The Senate worried about his influence. When he was ordered to give up his command, Caesar faced a choice. Obedience meant political ruin. Resistance meant civil war. He chose war. Caesar marched against his rivals and defeated them one by one. The Republic's armies fought each other instead of foreign enemies. When the fighting ended, Caesar stood alone at the top. He became dictator. Caesar ruled with confidence and speed. He reformed laws, reorganized government, and rewarded his supporters. To many Romans, he brought relief after years of instability. To others, he represented the death of liberty. Fear returned. A group of senators believed the Republic could still be saved if Caesar was removed. They struck together, killing him in public. They believed this act would restore the old order. They were wrong. Collapse of the Republic. Caesar's death did not revive the Republic. It shattered what remained of it. Rome fell into confusion and violence once again. The institutions still existed, but they had no authority. Attempts to restore the old system failed. Power no longer came from tradition or law. It came from control of armies and loyalty of followers. The Republic had lost the ability to govern itself peacefully. Rome was no longer a republic in practice. It was waiting for a new form. Augustus and the Empire. Out of the chaos emerged Augustus. He understood Rome better than any man before him. He knew the people feared kings, yet longed for stability. So he offered both illusion and order. Augustus claimed to restore the Republic while quietly holding all real power. Offices remained. The Senate still met. Elections continued. But nothing moved without his approval. This illusion satisfied Roman memory. Under Augustus, peace spread across the empire. This long calm became known as the Pax Romana. Trade expanded. Cities grew. Borders stabilized. To manage this vast world, Augustus built bureaucracy. Officials collected taxes, enforced law, and governed provinces. Administration replaced improvisation. The empire became organized, efficient, and durable. Rome was no longer a city-state. It was a system. Limits of empire. Tiber forests, yet even this system had limits. Rome pushed into unfamiliar lands beyond its borders. In the deep forests of Germania, disaster struck. Roman legions were destroyed. The defeat in the Teutoburg forest shocked the empire. Expansion halted. Rome accepted that some lands could not be controlled. Borders were fixed. Power had boundaries. The empire would endure, but not endlessly expand. Romanization and infrastructure. Within its borders, Rome focused on unity. Roads connected cities and provinces. Goods, soldiers, and messages moved quickly. Distance lost meaning. Citizenship became a tool of integration. Rome extended rights gradually, drawing conquered peoples into the system. Local elites adopted Roman law, language, and customs. Administration standardized life across vast regions. Romanization was not forced everywhere. It spread through benefit and inclusion. The empire became familiar to millions who had never seen Rome itself. Legacy and transition forward. Rome's greatest achievement was not conquest alone. It was continuity. The empire functioned as a system of law, infrastructure, and governance that outlived individuals. Yet within that system lay seeds of future decline. Power depended on stability. Stability depended on control. Control required resources, loyalty, and constant management. Over time, strain would grow. Rome endured because it adapted. But adaptation has limits. The Republic had fallen. The Empire had risen. A new chapter of Roman history had begun, shaped not by freedom, but by order. What came next would test that order. And that is where the journey continues. As the story reaches its end, the pace begins to slow. Events no longer rush forward. Battles and names fade into the background. The focus gently shifts away from action and toward understanding. The narration moves from what happened to what it meant. Instead of drama, the ending emphasizes continuity. Rome is no longer shown as a series of wars or rulers, but as something that endured across centuries. The rise and fall of individuals feels smaller now, part of a much larger flow. The tone becomes quieter. The listener is no longer being carried through events, but guided towards stillness. The story does not end suddenly. It settles. Rome is presented not as a single moment in history, but as a structure that changed shape over time. Kings became consuls. Consuls gave way to emperors. Power shifted, but it was never erased. What allowed Rome to survive was not strength alone. It was adaptation. When systems failed, they were reshaped. When balance broke, new balance was created. Rome did not remain the same, yet it remained Rome. Power was not destroyed. It was reorganized. This is the lasting meaning of the story. Rome endured because it learned to bend. Sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, but always forward. The listener is left with the sense that history is not a straight line, but a process. One that continues long after names and dates are forgotten. Only after this reflection comes the closing line. It is not a request. It is not an interruption. It is simply a gentle ending. This has been the story of Rome, here on Sleeping Historian. No urgency follows, no instruction is given. The story is complete. The listener is left to rest, reflect, or drift away with the sense that the journey has reached a natural, peaceful close.